Happening now, the United Nations is holding an emergency Security Council meeting after Iran launched its largest missile strike ever against Israel. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is vowing the Iranian regime will, quote, pay for it. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Campagno here with my co-hosts, Kayleigh McEnany and Harris Faulkner. And also joining us today, former State Department spokesperson under President Obama and Fox News contributor Marie Harf, and Fox and Friends co-host, host of the Brian Kilmeade radio show, and host of One Nation with Brian Kilmeade, Brian Kilmeade. Now, Israel is vowing to hit Iran back over the massive barrage of nearly 200 missiles they unleashed yesterday. Meanwhile, Israeli defense forces are continuing their bombardment of the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Our Trey Yingst is on the ground in northern Israel with the very latest. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. We do have an update for you from the Israeli military, who says during fighting against Hezbollah today in southern Lebanon, 8 Israeli soldiers were killed. We know 5 of them were from the Egoz commando unit. They were in a firefight with Hezbollah operatives inside of a village. They were ambushed, and ultimately, not only were 5 from their unit killed, but also a number wounded. 2 reconnaissance soldiers also killed, and a combat medic. This is the deadliest day for Israeli forces in Lebanon, and as we look forward, this will certainly change the psyche of the Israeli people as it relates to the ongoing ground operation against Hezbollah. We also have an image of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with top officials today. You can see he's not wearing a suit and tie. This comes just hours after that ballistic missile attack, and as the Israelis assess the damage to that massive attack from Iran overnight, 180 missiles soared through the skies of this country, some of them intercepted, others impacting the ground below. Israel's advanced missile defense system, the Arrow 3, working to take down much of the fire, but video circulating online shows significant impacts and craters caused by the missiles. 1 Palestinian man was killed in the West Bank and 2 Israelis injured. The Iranians say they used new Fatah hypersonic missiles and were responding to the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. Overnight, the Israeli Security Cabinet gathered to discuss what the Israeli response would be to this attack. Reports do indicate it will be significant. The missile attack comes as Iran-backed Hezbollah launched more than 100 rockets into Israel today, while the Israelis continued to target the Lebanese capital of Beirut with airstrikes. We're also following that other security incident out of Tel Aviv yesterday. 7 people killed in a shooting there, and the police say that these attackers came from the West Bank. Clearly, many fronts at the same time quite active for the Israelis as they try to determine how they will respond to that missile attack overnight. Guys?
Trey, thank you, and stay safe. We are now learning more about the United States' role in defending Israel against Iran's strike. President Biden says that he ordered our military to help shoot down those Iranian missiles. Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon with more on the military's response. Jennifer.
Emily, we've just received the first video from the U.S. Navy, and it shows the USS Bulkley firing its Aegis interceptors to hit the incoming Iranian ballistic missiles. The Pentagon is still assessing how many of Iran's ballistic missiles were shot down by the dozen interceptor missiles fired from 2 of its guided missile destroyers in the eastern Mediterranean, the USS Cole and USS Bulkley. The U.S. Navy employed the Aegis sea-based ballistic missile defense system to shoot down some of the incoming missiles, we've learned. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke multiple times to his Israeli counterpart yesterday. He issued the following statement, quote, "We condemn this outrageous act of aggression by Iran, and we call on Iran to halt any further attacks, including from its proxy terrorist groups. We will never hesitate to protect our forces and interests in the Middle East and to support the defense of Israel and our partners in the region," a message echoed by President Biden.
The attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective, and this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military. Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
The Pentagon saw signs that Iran was preparing for a ballistic missile attack when it began moving missile launchers following the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah last Friday. All of the nearly 200 ballistic missiles were fired from Iranian territory, none by Hezbollah or the Houthis.
It's something that we've been monitoring. Certainly, this was a significant attack, probably about twice the size in terms of scope of what we saw earlier.
And State Department said the U.S. was not given a heads up in advance by Iran. A U.S. official tells Fox News Iran has been at a state of readiness to launch an attack on Israel within 12 to 24 hours since early August, following the July 31st assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. The question now is what comes next. Emily.
Jennifer Griffin, thank you. Marie Harf, it's been a few years since you were at the State Department, and yet it has gone by like that. Tell us what Americans need to know and your assessment of the current situation.
Yeah, I mean, and we're still facing many of the same threats. And if you think about the fact that Monday is the one-year anniversary since the October 7th terrorist attack from Hamas. And in that year, Israel has been able to take a lot of the Hamas leadership off the battlefield. Hezbollah leadership, these are men that were responsible for Israeli deaths, American deaths, deaths of many Palestinians, by the way, as well. And Iran is really embarrassed right now because their proxies are under a lot of strain because of Israeli intelligence, Israeli military operations backed up by the United States. I mean, when you look at that map of all the U.S. military assets that are in the region, and the intelligence I know we are giving the Israelis to go after these terrorist organizations, Iran has a choice to make, as does Israel, because Iran is back on its heels. They had a leader of Hamas killed in Tehran. Their top proxy, Hassan Nasrallah, killed by an Israeli strike. And we saw them yesterday go after Israel with more than they ever had before. But it didn't do a lot of damage. And now Israel has a choice about how to respond. And there's lots of people saying this is the time to strike Iran. And I hear a lot of echoes of like the lead up to the Iraq war, like it would not have a ton of, secondary impacts. It would be easy. We could just strike their ballistic missiles facilities. We could just strike their nuclear facilities. And that is a very dangerous game to play. So I think Israel right now is trying to figure out how to continue degrading these terrorist organizations, how to punish Iran. But I don't think Israel wants to either push Iran to really race towards a nuclear weapon, which they can do now that they're not part of the Iran deal, or to really have an all-out war. I don't think the Israelis want that. The Israeli people certainly don't. Israeli generals don't. And so how do you strike that balance? I think that's the question for the Israelis right now.
Right, and great point, Kilmeade, that the Islamic Republic are who have been racing toward a war and frankly have declared a war on Israel forever. And it's the Iranians and the people who are wanting to be in peace and to wanting to further the economic interests. So the question is the messaging enough from our administration to show support for Israel so that they are not alone and they do not feel alone?
Absolutely not. I mean, we got their back. You have a right to defend yourself. We hear the rhetoric. But what about the action? Yeah, we're giving them arms. That's been an agreement that's been in place since Harry Truman backed up Israel as a nation. But the arms are there. They're slowing down. They definitely slowed the 2,000-pound bombs and some other munitions. That may have picked up, according to the brain room I asked right before we got here. But here's the thing. This is all about restrictions. Zelensky's begging, thanks for the weapons. Can I use them to hit the Russia who invaded us? Hey, thanks for the weapons. I think we've got to hit these guys back. Last time, they got restrained. Take the win, Joe Biden said. This time, they have to go for the nuclear weapons because they showed already that Iran cannot be trusted. They're already hit them with ballistic missiles. How could they possibly leave that nuclear program intact? And they should take out the oil refineries at the same time. This is a remarkably unpopular government with its own people. This is a unique window of opportunity. We have to back them. That same government killed 3 of our guys through the militias in Syria. The same government has the Houthi rebels shelling us in the Red Sea, which have to knock these ships out of the sky, these rockets out of the sky. We have every reason to not only back them, maybe contribute to an offensive in Iran.
Kayleigh, as an integral part of the Trump administration messaging, are we there at that point where indeed Israel can finally succeed eradicating all of these proxies of the Islamic regime?
I hope so, but not with the tepid support from the Biden administration. Look, 181 ballistic missiles rained down yesterday. Largest ballistic missile attack in history. 10 million people had to run for cover. That's like all of New York City having to find a bomb shelter. That's the equivalent. And the message from Biden on Monday, when he was asked about a limited incursion into Lebanon so 60,000 Israelis can go back to their home, he said, we need a ceasefire. Yesterday, the message changed to we fully support Israel. But here we are today. UN Ambassador Linda Smith-Greenfield is at the UN. She said we fully support Israel, and then immediately goes to we need a ceasefire. No. The answer is allow Israel to defend its borders after the largest ballistic missile strike in history, period, end of story, drop the ceasefire language. 1,200 individuals killed on October 7th. Still more than 100 hostages, babies in the hands of Hamas. I am tired of the ceasefire language. Drop it, United States. The UN has set a pretty low bar on the world stage. Let's at least manage to hop over that bar that is on the floor.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And who wants to take a lecture about how to protect a border from this administration?
Exactly.
I mean, we are facing one of the worst situations we've ever seen in this country. And yes, we have seen a decrease in number of people coming across the border, but the deadliness of fentanyl is still there. So, Iran, you said, and I thought that was interesting, Marie, that they're embarrassed right now. The only person that they managed to kill with all that targeting was a Palestinian.
That's right.
Yeah. So they're embarrassed, and they're being taken to task from the areas around them, wanting to know, exactly, well, how does that happen? So they're more than embarrassed. They're ineffective. But they have drawn the line for us to see the connection points. When Hamas and Hezbollah are under stress by Israel, Iran hits. Well, that means they're all in it together. So now I completely understand why Israel did what we don't have the intestinal fortitude to do. They went after the Houthis in Yemen because they're the next proxy of Iran. And it is clear as day that Iran has a fatwa out on us and Israel. And so they're going to hit us, they're going to do what they need, and they're going to try to use other people. And my goodness, they'll kill a Palestinian in the way.
And you know what, Harris? Remember, they're hacked to the Trump campaign right now, and they're trying to kill him. To the point where they've already altered how the former president's traveling, and they already stopped him from doing an outdoor rally in Wisconsin.
Yeah, no, I mean, all of it comes together and it becomes so clear who the enemy is. But to take a lecture about how Israel should protect itself from bordering countries, that's more than rich. That would be stupid to listen to this country. With this administration on how to protect your border, Israel, do what you got to do.
Our prayers and support remain with Israel and all those innocent people under the thumb of the Islamic Republic. Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.